He walked into the luxury store to buy a suit. But they handed him a janitor's uniform instead. What happened next left the entire staff speechless. Tyrion McCabe stepped out of his matte black Range Rover and looked up at the sleek glass facade of Gray & More, one of Chicago's most prestigious luxury menswear boutiques. The wind tugged at his cashmere overcoat as he adjusted the collar and moved toward the entrance with measured grace. He had 15 minutes to find a crisp new shirt before an important lunch with a U.S. senator. Normally, his assistant would have handled it, but Tyrion liked to keep certain details personal, especially when it came to appearance. As he entered, a trio of employees stood near the front, their laughter fading the moment they saw him. He was the only black man in the store, wearing no flashy watch or designer logos, just clean, understated elegance. And that, apparently, wasn't enough. A young associate with gelled blonde hair named Brett barely glanced at Tyrion before speaking in a dismissive tone. "Janitor's closet is in the back, man. We've got a bunch of windows that need touching up." Tyrion blinked once, but said nothing. His presence didn't register with them as a customer. He wasn't offered assistance, wasn't greeted, wasn't even acknowledged properly. A moment later, the store manager, a woman named Candace with a tight smile and clipboard in hand, joined the scene. She held up a gray uniform shirt in a plastic wrapper. "Don't forget to sign the check-in sheet this time. We docked the last guy for skipping it." Tyrion stared at the shirt, then at Candace. "I'm not," he began, then paused. What was the point? He looked around. Other customers, all white, browsed racks or sipped complimentary espresso. Not one of them received a cleaning rag or were told where the janitor's supplies were kept. Tyrion let out a slow breath. He turned, quietly placed the uniform back on the counter without saying a word, and walked out. Outside, he stood still for a moment, watching the people rush past. His hands were steady. His voice calm when he pulled out his phone. "Elvina," he said to his assistant, "clear the rest of my morning." Something came up. Back at the Miravolt headquarters, a towering smart tech campus on the edge of downtown Chicago, Tyrion McCabe walked through the lobby in silence. Dozens of employees offered polite greetings as he passed, but he returned none of them. His mind was elsewhere, still echoing with the sound of Brett's dismissive voice and the way Candace had carelessly shoved that janitor's uniform toward him. Elvina Royston, his executive assistant, noticed immediately. She'd worked for Tyrion for 6 years, long enough to read his silence like a language. He usually walked with unshakable composure, but now there was a coldness in his movements, something too precise. When he entered his glass-walled office and closed the door behind him, she gave him a few minutes before knocking. He didn't answer. She came in anyway. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Tyrion stood at the massive window overlooking the city skyline, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "I stopped by a store this morning," he said, his voice low. "Gray & More." She raised an eyebrow. "The boutique on Wallace?" He nodded once. "I went in to pick up a shirt. They handed me a janitor's uniform. No questions. No hesitation. Just saw me, decided who I was, and gave me a mop." There was a long silence. Elvina closed the door fully, her face growing serious. "Do you want to file a discrimination complaint?" Tyrion finally turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes had hardened. "No," he said simply. "I want the whole damn store." Elvina stared at him, stunned. "You want to buy it?" "I want to own it," Tyrion said, sitting down at his desk. "I want to own the floor they stand on, the racks they hang their overpriced ignorance from, and every inch of their smug assumptions." He opened his laptop and began typing. "Get me Cardon Flint. Today. Tell him it's urgent." Elvina nodded, then paused. "You're not doing this out of anger, are you?" Tyrion looked up slowly. "No. Not anger," he said quietly. I'm doing it because I don't believe in public scenes. I believe in private consequences. She gave a tight smile. Then I'll call Cardon now. As she stepped out of the office, Tyrion leaned back in his chair. He wasn't interested in humiliating anyone. Not in shouting, or suing, or standing on some righteous soapbox. That was easy. No, what he wanted was deeper, slower, and far more permanent. He wanted them to remember his silence more than they ever would have remembered his outrage. Cardon Flint was not just any attorney, he was Tyrion McCabe's most trusted legal strategist, a sharp-minded dealmaker known for his calm precision and unshakable loyalty. Within an hour of Elvina's call, he was seated across from Tyrion in the executive lounge of the Miravolt Tower, legal pad in hand and coffee untouched. Tyrion didn't waste time on pleasantries. Gray and Moore, he said simply. I want to acquire them. Quietly. No public trail leading back to me. Cardon nodded once, already flipping through his notes. We've dealt with luxury retail before. I can set up a shell entity, Northland Equity, that'll handle the purchase. Silent capital structure. No obvious fingerprints. But the question is, why them? Tyrion leaned forward, clasping his hands. Because they humiliated me, he said, his tone calm, almost clinical. Because if they can do that to me, a black man in a tailored coat, CEO of one of the largest private tech companies in the country, imagine how they treat the average customer who looks like me. Cardon didn't flinch. He'd seen this side of Tyrion before, not emotional, not angry, but coldly determined. The kind of resolve that built empires and buried rivals. I'll begin the process today, Cardon said. But you should know, the store's on shaky ground. Gray and Moore has been hemorrhaging profits for the last 6 quarters. Word is, one of the owners, an old guy named Randolph Finch, is looking to unload his stake. Might be the perfect time. Even better, Tyrion replied. I don't want a trophy. I want leverage. Find out how deep their debts go, who they owe, and how desperate Finch really is. Over the next 48 hours, Cardon and his team dug deep. The report that landed on Tyrion's desk was exactly what he expected, and more. Gray and Moore had a debt load approaching $2 million. The flagship store on Wallace Avenue was their crown jewel, but also their biggest liability. The company had defaulted on a loan, faced a pending labor dispute, and struggled with outdated digital systems. Their online sales had collapsed after a failed software rollout the previous year. More importantly, Randolph Finch was ready to sell. His 2 partners were deadlocked in a bitter internal feud, and he was desperate for a way out. That was all Tyrion needed. By the end of the week, Northland Equity submitted a confidential letter of intent to purchase a controlling share of Gray and Moore's flagship location. The offer came with terms that were hard to refuse: immediate debt relief, technology upgrades, and a vague promise to preserve core staffing and brand identity. The deal closed in under 10 days. None of the existing store employees were told anything. On paper, it looked like another faceless hedge fund had swooped in to rescue a struggling retailer. But Tyrion McCabe now owned the store that once handed him a janitor's uniform. And no one inside had any idea that the man they tried to humiliate was now the one signing their paychecks. 2 weeks after the acquisition, on a chilly Monday morning, Tyrion McCabe returned to Gray and Moore. He wore the same tailored cashmere overcoat, the same gloves, the same quiet dignity. Only this time, he didn't come to buy a shirt. He came to take back the room. The boutique looked no different from the outside. Inside, the same violins played softly from hidden speakers. A new seasonal window display had gone up: charcoal suits, burgundy silk ties, hand-stitched loafers. It was luxury, wrapped in exclusivity. But beneath that polished surface, nothing had changed. Candace was behind the counter, scrolling through a tablet. Brett leaned against the register, sipping from a branded porcelain cup. Tyrion pushed open the door and stepped in, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Brett looked up and immediately frowned. "You again," he said, his voice carrying the same casual contempt. "I thought we already told you, Janitor's closet is in the back." Candace didn't look up from her tablet. "You're not even supposed to be here without checking in through the service entrance," she said flatly. "Honestly, the nerve." Tyrion paused near a mannequin in a velvet blazer. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached into his coat, pulled out a thin black folder, and placed it neatly on the counter in front of Candace. "What's this?" she asked, annoyed. "Ownership documents," he replied calmly. "My name is Tyrion McCabe. As of 10 days ago, I'm the new owner of this boutique." The silence hit like a thunderclap. Brett straightened. Candace's eyes flicked down to the paperwork, her mouth parting slightly as she scanned the notarized signatures and seals. This can't be real," she whispered. "Oh, but it is," Tyrion said, his voice as steady as it was unforgiving. "You see, while you were too busy judging my worth by the color of my skin and the cut of my coat, I was buying the floor you stand on." Brett took a step back, face flushing. "Look, man, Mr. McCabe, I didn't mean anything by it, okay? It was just a mistake." Tyrion locked eyes with him. "No, Mr. Langley. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. You saw me, made an assumption, and acted on it without hesitation. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't care. You decided what I was. And now, I'm deciding what happens next." He turned to Candace. "As store manager, you were responsible for maintaining professionalism. Instead, you modeled prejudice. You didn't just fail, you poisoned the tone for your staff." Candace opened her mouth to speak, but he raised a hand. "Don't," he said firmly. "You had your say the last time I walked in. Now it's my turn." Behind them, the remaining staff began to gather, 2 cashiers, a stock assistant, and an older man who handled alterations. They looked from Tyrion to the managers with wide eyes. "I'll be meeting with each of you individually today," Tyrion announced. "Some of you will remain. Others will not. That will depend on your actions, your attitudes, and how you treat people who don't look like you." The room was frozen. Then he nodded once and walked toward the office in the back, as if he'd always belonged there. Because now, he did. Tyrion sat behind the glass-topped desk in the manager's office, a room he now owned, though it still carried the sterile coldness of Candace's reign. A single leather chair sat across from him, and a legal pad rested at his side. He didn't need notes. He wasn't interested in theatrics. He was interested in character. One by one, he called the employees in, beginning with Brett Langley. Brett stepped inside, trying to keep a professional expression, but Tyrion could see the anxiety behind his forced smile. He sat down, shifting in his seat. "Mr. McCabe," he began nervously, "I just want to say how sorry I am. I didn't mean to disrespect you. I honestly thought." "You thought I was the janitor," Tyrion interrupted, his voice cool. "Without asking. Without verifying. Just saw a black man walk through the door, and decided to delegate cleaning duty." Brett swallowed hard. It wasn't about race. I mean, maybe it came off that way, but... But what? Tyrion leaned forward. Did I look unkempt? Was I wearing rags? Or was I simply not white enough for you to consider that I might be a paying customer? There was no rage in his voice, no shouting. Just an unbearable clarity that made Brett squirm. "I messed up," Brett said quietly. "I see that now." "You didn't just mess up," Tyrion said. "You exposed something deeper than a mistake. You revealed the assumptions you walk around with, the way you categorize people before they open their mouths." He stood up. "I can't teach you to see people differently. That kind of lesson takes more than training, it takes humility. And based on what I saw, you're not ready for that. Brett's shoulders slumped. So I'm fired? You are, Tyrion replied. Effective immediately. Brett nodded, eyes downcast, and walked out without another word. Next came Candace. She entered stiffly, already on the defensive. I've been with this company for 12 years. I've trained dozens of staff, managed through 3 remodels. And yet, you couldn't manage a proper greeting for someone who didn't fit your definition of a customer, Tyrion interrupted. Her jaw tightened. I was doing my job. We were expecting a new janitorial hire that morning. I assumed. You assumed wrong, Tyrion said, folding his arms. And instead of correcting that assumption with grace, you doubled down on it. You dismissed me. You handed me a uniform without a second glance. She raised her chin. So what, this is revenge? No, he said. This is accountability. You're in a leadership position, Candace. But leadership isn't just about sales metrics or inventory counts. It's about setting the tone. And the tone you set told your staff it's okay to demean people who don't look the part. He paused, then added, you're no longer employed here. Candace stood slowly, her face pale, then turned and walked out with quiet fury. The next few meetings were different. An older tailor named Wilbur came in, trembling slightly, but Tyrion shook his hand and offered him a seat with respect. I remember you, Tyrion said. You looked up when I walked in. You didn't speak, but you looked me in the eye. Wilbur nodded. Didn't seem right, what they were saying. But I didn't know if it was my place. Sometimes, Tyrion said gently, just noticing is a start. You're staying. Wilbur exhaled in relief, eyes moistening. One by one, Tyrion spoke to the rest. The stock assistant, a young Dominican man named Jairo, stayed. A black woman named Soretta, who'd worked the register and treated all customers with kindness, stayed. By the end of the day, the toxic core of the store had been excised. Tyrion hadn't raised his voice once. He hadn't needed to. He simply held a mirror up to each person, and let their reflection make the decision for him. The transformation of Gray and Moore began quietly, without press releases or social media announcements. Tyrion believed in lasting change, not viral gestures. He understood that what truly mattered was not how loudly you announced reform, but how deeply you rebuilt the foundation. The first change was leadership. In place of Candace, Tyrion appointed a new store manager, Xaden Graves, a soft-spoken black man in his early 50s with silver in his beard and quiet command in his presence. Xaden had spent 20 years managing retail operations for a mid-tier brand but had never been considered for a luxury position. Tyrion had met him once years ago and remembered the calm efficiency, the sharp eye for detail, and, most importantly, the way Xaden treated every customer with dignity. You don't need to reinvent the store, Tyrion told him on his first day. Just restore what should have always been there, respect. Xaden nodded, his voice steady. I understand. New staff were brought in, some recruited from smaller boutiques, others from customer service roles outside of fashion altogether. Tyrion prioritized attitude over pedigree. He chose people who had once been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed, just like he had been. Julienne Poe, a former high school English teacher turned stylist, joined the sales floor with grace and empathy. Devonte Crowe, who'd worked maintenance in a mall for years, now trained in garment fitting and styling. Tyrion even kept on a few long-time employees who showed a willingness to unlearn and grow, because transformation wasn't just about replacement, it was also about redemption. He gave the team one guiding principle. Luxury means nothing if it makes someone feel small. Then came the aesthetic changes. Gone were the stuffy window mannequins frozen in sterile poses. Instead, Xaden worked with a local black designer to create vibrant, layered displays, blending elegance with authenticity. The playlist shifted too, still classical, but now interspersed with smooth jazz, modern soul, and carefully chosen blues. The lighting was softened. The front desk staff were retrained not just on service but on listening, presence, and human decency. Tyrion also quietly hired a DEI consultant to work with the team, not as a checkbox, but as a continuous resource. Weekly workshops were held behind closed doors. These weren't scoldings, they were conversations. Some were uncomfortable. All were necessary. And the community noticed. People of color who had once avoided Gray and Moore began to return, cautiously at first, then steadily. A young black couple walked in one afternoon looking for a wedding suit and were stunned when Julianne addressed them with warm interest and full attention. An older Latino gentleman who had once been shadowed around the store was now greeted by name and offered coffee while browsing. Sales didn't just recover, they grew. Word spread that something rare had happened, a luxury store that didn't look down on you. That saw you. The final touch came 3 weeks in, when Tyrion approved the installation of a brass plaque by the entrance. It read simply: "Luxury is measured by respect. Everyone is welcome." It wasn't a slogan. It was a statement of truth. And it marked the beginning of a new era, not just for Gray and Moore, but for everyone who had ever been told, in subtle or brutal ways, that they didn't belong. It was a rainy afternoon when the woman walked into the store, elegantly dressed, though a bit frail, with a string of pearls at her neck and a cane in hand. She paused just inside the entrance of the newly transformed Gray and Moore, glancing around the space as if she were stepping into a memory. Xaden approached with a gentle smile. "Good afternoon, ma'am. May I help you find something?" The woman's eyes lingered on the plaque by the door before returning to Xaden. "I'm not here to shop," she said softly. "I came to speak with the new owner. Mr. McCabe. Is he in?" Xaden hesitated. This was not a typical request. "Do you have an appointment?" She shook her head. "No. But my name is Marjorie Wells. I'm Candace's mother." Xaden's expression flickered, but he nodded and asked her to wait. Moments later, Tyrion was informed, and though surprised, he asked that she be brought to the office immediately. When she entered, she moved slowly but carried herself with the dignity of someone used to being heard. Tyrion stood to greet her and offered her a seat. She declined the handshake but looked him in the eye. "I assume you know who I am," she began. "Yes, ma'am," Tyrion said respectfully. She sighed, resting both hands on her cane. "I raised my daughter to be polished. Educated. Successful. But somewhere along the way, she learned to believe that polish means superiority, and education means exclusion. That's on me." Tyrion said nothing, simply listening. Marjorie continued, her voice tightening. "She told me what happened. Not all the details, but enough. At first, I was furious with you, for humiliating her. But then, I came to see the store for myself. And what I saw today," her voice cracked slightly. "It's better than it ever was under her management." There was a silence. Then she added, more quietly, "And I just wanted to say, thank you. For making this a place my granddaughter can walk into and feel seen. And I'm sorry. For what my daughter did. And maybe for what I passed down." Tyrion leaned back slightly. This wasn't something he expected. He looked at Marjorie with the kind of depth that only someone who had been misjudged many times could possess. "I appreciate your words," he said finally. "But you don't owe me an apology. Change doesn't start with blame, it starts with honesty." Marjorie gave a slow nod. "If there's anything I can do to support what you're building here, let me know." Tyrion smiled for the first time in the entire conversation. "You already did," he said. "You showed up. That matters more than you think." They spoke for a few more minutes, and then she left quietly, disappearing into the drizzle. Later that evening, as the store lights dimmed and the staff prepared to close, Tyrion stood in the front, looking at the plaque again. He thought about how rare it was for people to return and acknowledge their part in something broken. But when they did, it made rebuilding that much more meaningful. And in that quiet moment, watching raindrops slide down the window, he felt something shift. This was no longer about a boutique. It was about something larger. Something lasting. 1 year later, Grey and Moore had become unrecognizable, in the best possible way. Once a cold monument to elitism, the boutique was now a thriving hub of refined service rooted in humanity. The walls still bore the high-end fabrics and sharp silhouettes of designer craftsmanship, but the soul of the store had changed completely. The boutique's reputation had grown far beyond Chicago. Articles appeared in national publications, calling it a case study in inclusive luxury. Forbes ran a feature titled "Respect as a Business Model," highlighting how the store had not only turned around its finances but also redefined what prestige could mean in the 21st century. Business schools reached out, asking Tyrion McCabe to speak about leadership, vision, and quiet power. He declined them all. He wasn't chasing applause. Instead, he was chasing something much rarer, integrity that left a trace. One morning, Tyrion arrived early, before the staff, before the music started playing, before the sunlight fully lit the showroom. He walked the aisles slowly, running his hand over the sleeves of a slate blue blazer, watching the dust motes float through the soft light like tiny suspended truths. He stopped in front of the brass plaque near the door, the words still clean and strong. Luxury is measured by respect. Everyone is welcome. Xaden joined him a moment later, steaming coffee in hand. "It's strange," he said, "how much this place has changed, and yet, how much it finally feels like what it was always meant to be." Tyrion nodded slowly. "Because this store used to dress people for success," he said. "Now, it reminds them of their worth." Customers began to arrive soon after, people of all races, backgrounds, and income levels. Some came to buy, others just to look. All were greeted warmly. There was no cold glance of evaluation, no hidden test of appearance. Only service. Only care. Later that day, a teenager walked in, black, tall, awkward, wearing a borrowed dress shirt 2 sizes too big. He looked nervous, holding a crumpled flyer for a youth mentorship event that Xaden had posted on the community board outside. Julienne approached him with a smile and offered him a seat. Within minutes, she and Devonte were helping him choose a jacket for his first-ever job interview. They didn't ask about budget. They didn't ask if he was qualified to shop there. They treated him like he belonged, because he did. Tyrion stood at a distance, watching the scene unfold. He didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. He turned to leave, pausing at the door, sunlight hitting the back of his coat. He remembered the first time he walked into this place. Remembered the insult. The quiet humiliation. The uniform pressed into his hand. Now, he walked out of the same door as the man who turned that insult into change. There was no fanfare. No cameras. Just one man reclaiming his place in the world, and leaving it better than he found it. In my view, the ending of this story carries a quiet but profound sense of justice. It avoids the trap of revenge and instead embraces transformation, not just of a space, but of the people within it and the values they uphold. Tyrion McCabe doesn't simply win, in the traditional sense, he leads by example, choosing integrity over outrage, dignity over spectacle. What makes the conclusion powerful is its restraint. Tyrion doesn't destroy the system, he reclaims it and reshapes it from within. The real victory isn't that he fired those who wronged him. The real victory is that he created a space where others no longer have to endure what he did. He took a personal moment of humiliation and turned it into a collective symbol of progress. It's a reminder that real change often happens not with noise, but with intention. With consistency. With the courage to stand tall, and speak quietly when it would be easier to shout. That's what makes the ending not just satisfying, but truly meaningful.